Hey Katie, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Very much enjoying this lovely sunny weather that we're having.
It's glorious, isn't it? It's just utterly glorious.
So, so nice. I think spring is officially in full flow at the moment.
Yeah, you're right.
So thank you ever so much for joining me today for this Wellbeing Wednesday. Carrie and I are going to be talking today about leaving lockdown, and I think this is a thing that a lot of us have been discussing at the moment, and largely in a positive light. But I think also we're kind of talking today about also some of maybe the harder aspects of leaving lockdown. So I will introduce Carrie first. She is the editor and content manager at healthhubble.com, and she's very passionate about sharing and promoting health and wellness info and choices. So Carrie's a great person to have here today to talk about this topic. And I will just hand over to Carrie just for a moment to give you a little top line about what Health Hubble is, if that's okay, Carrie.
Yep, that's absolutely fine. Well, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me, Katie. It's a real pleasure to be talking, and I know we've spoken several times, so it's lovely to be catching up with you. So you're quite right. I'm the editor and content manager at Health Hubble. Health Hubble was the idea of my colleagues, Dr. Jacqueline Seckley, who previously worked as an A&E doctor, and wanted to create a online platform to cover all aspects of health and well-being through a directory service that lists a whole host of disciplines and professionals and specialists, along with a compendium of articles written directly by healthcare professionals. So the two kind of merge together and allow members of the general public to be able to kind of get more curious about their health and well-being and understand how different disciplines kind of work together, and some of the professionals that are right on their doorstep ready to help them.
Amazing. It's such amazing to have it all there in one place. It's an incredible idea. And yeah, I've definitely been having a look through it. So, guys, we're going to talk today about this kind of mixed feeling, as I've referred to, about leaving lockdown. And Carrie's written a wonderful article that's currently up on Health Hubble about um, particularly going back into work after this time. And one thing that I pulled out that I just want to read verbatim here is about a quote from Rosie Weatherly from Mind. And she said that some of us might have found there were some unexpected plus points to lockdown and therefore feel uneasy or anxious about the prospect of it being lifted. And for example, we may be worried about normality resuming or not wanting to return to a faster pace with our busy daily lives and less downtime to ourselves. So I definitely resonate with this, and I think everybody's going to be dealing with the lifting of lockdown differently. Some feeling more positively than others. And I think it's important to know that if you are feeling uneasy about going back to, inverted commas, normal, that you're not alone. And although for me personally, I am very keen to get back to some sort of normal and, see your family and your friends as you could before, I think that pressure of social situations and the feeling of having to say yes all the time, and also the time that we've gained in lockdown, I'm going to struggle kind of going back to that pre-lockdown life. But I think what Carrie and I are going to focus on today is that you don't actually have to go back to that pre-lockdown life. We can take the things that we've learned today through the whole experience, the 13 months now, and take those good habits that we formed through into our post-lockdown life. So I just wanted to start with asking Carrie, really, or how are you feeling personally about leaving lockdown? And part two of that question is, have you picked up any good habits or habits you want to keep going through lockdown, that you want to keep going into that post-lockdown life?
Thank you. Well, I guess it's a real mixed bag, isn't it? I think we've all had a shared experience of restrictions. So we've all kind of gone through that stay at home order, that work from home if you can, not being able to see family and friends as you normally would. So there are shared experiences to a degree, but each of those experiences is going to be completely unique. So my kind of experience of lockdown is going to be completely different to anybody else. And I think it's okay, first of all, to feel however you do actually about coming out from lockdown. There is no specific right or wrong of how you should be feeling. So ultimately, if you are super excited to be getting back to pre kind of COVID and, life as it was, then as long as we're adhering to all the rules, then that's really great. And it's time to, start getting out and meeting up with friends and staying within your bubbles and doing all of that sort of stuff. But for those who are, tentative about getting back to how things were, that's quite all right. I mean, I'm quite a massive introvert. So people that don't necessarily know me probably won't know that. So for me, lockdown has been actually a kind of an opportunity where I've had more control over how I spend my time and what I do. So there is no set right or wrong. And I think, we shouldn't be placing any pressure on ourselves. I think ultimately it's about being kind, understanding kind of what the expectation is and being able to kind of set your expectation to how you're feeling. So there's no need to rush out, and go all out if you don't feel that you want to. For me, some of the habits that I've picked up during lockdown, I think probably the biggest thing has been exposure in nature. I'm lucky that where I live, there are lots of kind of country walks that you can go on, and you can go from quite a suburban area into, fields, and you can feel a million miles away from the grind of everyday life. So for me, that time in nature has just been marvellous. And I know from speaking to colleagues of mine, actually spending time in nature is really good for your mental health and well-being. So actually being in nature you can reduce down, your stress levels. So that's one thing that I will certainly be doing, is kind of keeping on top of that. And I think, for me, I work from home, and I know for a lot of people, they are still working from home. And there are these kind of blurred lines between the workplace and where you live. So actually trying to carve out some time to keep in some really good habits. So where you might not be on your commute to work every morning, actually carving some of that time out to get out and about, even for a morning walk, is, just so beneficial. So these are the things I think I'm going to be doing. My baking didn't go so well. I did try. We won't talk about that. It was a disaster.
Oh, that's so great to hear, Carrie. And I really resonate with the being out in nature. That's something that I also have done a lot more over in the last 13 months, even in the wintertime when it was cold, just getting out in the fresh air. And I think one of the things that I noticed is that I used to go on a walk and I used to listen to music or a podcast, or I used to be on the phone, or I used to, I was always doing two things at once. Whereas what I've been quite good at during lockdown in particular is going out without my phone and just listening to the birds, looking at the flowers, just the smells, just actually going back into nature and being like, oh, let's pay attention to this in this present moment, what we're doing now and here and now. And that's something that I'm certainly going to take into the rest of the year and moving forward. And especially being quite strict with myself, sometimes you can think, oh, I can't really be bothered to go for a walk now. Like, we all have those days. But that when you get back, you're going to feel so much better having had that walk than having sat on your bottom looking at your laptop or whatever you were doing. So yeah, I think it's just being aware of that effect that nature can have on us. And like you say, working in your industry and knowing the really beneficial effects of that. And feeling that intrinsically, it's a great feeling, isn't it?
It is. And I think I always kind of go back to Mel Robbins, who is a public speaker and always says, you're never going to feel ready to go out for that walk or go and exercise, or you have to push yourself to do it. And you're right, in the winter months, when it's not this beautiful weather and it's freezing cold, or it's, raining cats and dogs, you don't feel like doing it. But the feeling that you have once you've returned and knowing that you have lapped everybody who sat on the sofa is just a great feeling.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And then another thing that I've kind of picked up is journaling. So I don't know if you journal yourself, but it's something that I've been doing since December now. And just that action of taking 10 minutes in a day, which really didn't need to be a lockdown thing, like I should have had 10 minutes in my day prior to, but it's just the kind of extra thing that I wanted to incorporate into my day. And just being able to write down how you feel, you know, I can do a little bit of a color chart to track my mood, and doing it at the beginning and at the end of the day, even 5 minutes, not even 10 minutes really, 5 minutes at the beginning and end of the day. And it's just such an amazing practice. And I recommend it to anyone who maybe is feeling a little bit lost, feeling like they've got a lot of thoughts rushing around in their head, being able to take that time and just putting pen to paper, because it's not something that we do really. We normally use our phones or we use our laptop to kind of type out a message, but that connection of pen to paper is quite, for me, it's quite sacred in my morning and evening routine.
It's certainly a beneficial thing in the evening, and certainly for people who struggle in terms of sleep, it's a really good way to kind of have that mental mind clear out for before going to bed. And actually, if you're really struggling, you've got, you know, thoughts racing around your head, it's a great way to actually acknowledge those, and you can write those down as part of a list and then be able to close that book and actually be able to close those thoughts. It's a really good way of, you know, as part of a sleep hygiene routine, really.
Yeah, definitely. And just before we move on to the next question, I just wanted to kind of come back to one thing you said at the very beginning, Carrie, about everyone experiencing this lockdown as a very different experience, you know, some more positively than others. And I think, you know, the article you wrote about going back into the workplace, and maybe you could just expand a little bit more on that, and kind of how employers are going to have to acknowledge those differences, and how employees are going to have to acknowledge those differences as well.
It's a really big thing, isn't it? And I think prior to working within Health Hubble, I worked as a group operations manager for a media company, and one of my roles was HR. So when you are privileged enough, because it's a privileged role to sit within a HR function, and you are a guardian of individuals, you're a guardian of the team that are working within the business, and it's a very difficult balance of striking the caretaker of those individuals and that sounding board, and also the needs of the business. And you're quite right, as we return back to the workplace, everyone is going to have had a completely different kind of experience from lockdown. We're going to have some people that have really enjoyed working from home, and actually they have never felt so productive, and they've thoroughly enjoyed being able to have a really set routine and have worked really well in terms of connecting with their colleagues via Zoom or email, and they've really enjoyed that. You're going to have also some colleagues who have really struggled with working from home, and their personalities are such that they actually need to be surrounded by people, and that's how they perform best, through creativity, through, you know, bouncing ideas off of each other. So working from home for those individuals has actually been really hard. And suddenly they've gone from this social group of individuals that all have a common goal. The common goal hasn't changed, just in the way that we achieve it has. Across that section as well, you're also going to have individuals that may have lost a friend or a relative to COVID, possibly haven't been able to attend a funeral, be able to mourn their loss. So there's huge support that's required for those individuals. For just as many individuals who are asking for help and support, there is equally probably the same number of individuals affected that aren't going to be asking. So it's having that awareness that although your colleagues may come back into the workplace and they look exactly the same, the effects and the experiences that they've had will have had a real impact on them. So being able to offer an open door, I think, firstly, is really, really important, and underlining that. And I think also being able to signpost to organisations that can help, because, as I said, you're going to have some individuals that don't necessarily want to ask for help within the workplace, but may be really keen on getting help and support outside of work, and keeping that as a very confidential and personal kind of journey. And equally, for members of staff returning back to the workplace, that's that experience that people have had from line management and people that are driving the business forward. Those experiences are going to be no different. Everyone has been through a very, very difficult period of time. And in terms of mental health and how that kind of, has affected us all, it's going to take a really long time to really kind of gauge and understand. So, I mean, I returned back to the gym on Saturday. I probably should have done it a lot sooner. I mean, don't judge. But I waited for like the rush of people to go in front of me. Like I was being good. I was letting people go ahead of me. And interestingly, when I actually got up to my gym kind of turnstile, my code, my little pass for getting in on my phone wouldn't work. And actually the young lady behind the desk kind of was quite a bit curt and a bit rude in trying to help me. And you have to kind of take that step back and actually appreciate, for her, this is her first week back in the workplace. And actually, she is the face of that organisation when you walk in. And you have no idea of some of the stresses that she's been under, both at work and at home. There are going to be people that, are suddenly the main breadwinner in the household. People have lost their jobs. There's just so much kind of turbulence, and the ripple effect is going to be enormous. So I think really kind of understanding our ability to support others, and actually our understanding, and sometimes just being present and really looking and really understanding and listening is a huge, it's a great tool to be able to support people around you.
Definitely. And I think that word awareness really strikes with me, and just making sure that you're not quick to assume something. I think that's such an important thing that we all take on. So yeah, thank you for that. That's really, really great explanation. I'm just looking for my last question. So the last question, we've just got 3 or 4 minutes left, is about things that we can take away from the lockdown experience. And I think for all of us, even if it's only small, there will be something that we can take away from the last 13 months. And I know for me, I mean, my whole career has changed because of lockdown, and that is such a positive thing, in that it did give me that push I think I needed. Although I hate to admit it, it gave me that push to be brave and go into yoga full time, and be self-employed, and run with my dreams. And for that, I have to be thankful for lockdown. But I was just wondering, for you, is there anything in particular that, whether that might be community or resilience, or just the importance of technology that we've all realised, that you kind of can take out of this experience?
I guess for me, I think resilience is a really key word. And being able to be maybe a bit more realistic with our expectations versus reality.
Yeah.
Technology has always played a huge role in kind of how I keep in contact with my family. All of my family are in the States. So for us, a Skype call, other forms and mediums are available, has always been a staple way of communicating. So, but I think really, the resilience of being able to take the blows as they come. And this past 13 months, this is what we've had to do so frequently, is kind of readjust and realign and, kind of establish different sorts of boundaries, whether that's establishing the whole kind of work-life balance, and boundaries, if you've had kids at home, you've been homeschooling as well, and spinning all these plates. It's really kind of understanding our expectations and really understanding what those mean to us. And I just think being appreciative of the time that we have as well, and actually how do we use that, for me is a big kind of take home. And I think again, as you said, community, and really appreciating those people around you. It has been hard. I think families and individuals have found it really difficult, because suddenly, for the first time ever, you've been cooped up in the same household for a really long period of time. Fortunately, none of my family are under the patio right now, but we've even had, moments where it's been quite hard, but we've all come through that. And actually, I think as a unit, we're an awful lot more accommodating, accepting, and resilient.
Yeah, and also adaptable as well. I would throw in that mix, because we've had to adapt, and quickly as well. It's not like we've had months or years to do it. Sometimes it's been days or weeks, especially only for me, going back to end of March last year, having to take my classes from in person to online within, it had to happen kind of within days. So adaptability as well, I think, is a really good one to throw into that mix. And I like the way you said about time, and we were having a little chat about this before we came on, about how it still feels, well, for me personally, it still feels like I'm busy, but at the moment it feels like I'm having more choice over what I'm spending my time on, and I'm not being bombarded as much by outside influences of people wanting me to do things. So that's quite a nice feeling. We were talking about being more in control with our time, but that's certainly something we can take forward into the next year, or the foreseeable future, that control over your time, and not having to feel like saying yes all the time. I feel like certainly as a nation, we're quite often good at saying yes, but we're not so good at saying no. So just know that it's okay if you don't want to go to that outdoor pub drink with your mates, that you don't have to say yes if you're not feeling up to it. And putting those boundaries in for yourself, because I guess lockdown has put in those boundaries, but you can keep some of them up if you want them for yourself. Of course, if you don't, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, I don't know if you had anything to add on that point.
Yeah, I just say, I think when I look back to pre-COVID, I think our time, we didn't necessarily appreciate the amount of time that we have. And actually, we don't need to be people pleasers. You're not going to please all the people all the time. And I think ultimately understanding where our own energy reserves come from and how we keep those on an even keel. For me, lockdown has really kind of been able to cement that understanding of actually what energizes me and what drains me. So that, I think, is a hugely powerful thing when we start looking at coming out of lockdown and actually, where do I want to spend my time? Who are the people that really energize me, inspire me? And are there individuals or groups or situations that actually I find quite challenging and draining and actually may want to reduce? So I think, understanding how and where we spend our time and what ultimately nourishes us and inspires us and energizes, it's kind of understanding kind of that balance and trying to get that right.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't know about you, but for me personally, I do feel like sometimes I don't know what energizes me or what doesn't. You get to the end of the day and you're just exhausted, but you're like, well, what did I enjoy about that day? Which is just going back to journaling, which is why I find journaling really helpful, because it's still kind of fresh in your mind. You can write down, all that experience was positive, I enjoyed that, I had fun, that wasn't so much, so maybe I'll try and do more of the first thing and less of the latter. And it's just having that awareness of those different parts of your day, and what, like you say, what's bringing you energy and what's draining you. So that can even be a one step back if you're like I was, trying to identify those different activities. So I'm really sorry, Carrie, but we have run out of time.
Already?
I absolutely loved speaking to you today, and I feel like we could go on for another half an hour. But that was excellent. So good to hear from you. And yes, thank you for your time, and hopefully we can catch up again. It would be lovely to chat to you again.
Oh, I would love that, Katie. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you so much. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Bye.